Church for dilation blues. Ben's prosthesis lay on his nightstand where he had put it after Marjorie had done yet another adjustment to make it more natural in function, safer, and more comfortable. This time the catheter tube was removable. She supplied about 30 cut-down disposable catheters, pre-lubricated, sterile, and in sealed containers. It was gone for a while longer because she had to adjust the distance between the catheter and the pump. With the catheter inserted, it stretched the urethra because the distance between the vagina and the urethra was narrower than the 2 points on the prosthesis. Marjorie took proper measurements and fabricated a closer attachment point for the catheter. Ben was too tired from his therapy to even try it. That was a month ago. In the intervening period, Ben got used to doing without it. It was feeling more natural to him by now to pull his pants down and sit. The people at the hospital checked for metal before they administered X-rays and left the room, so his secret stayed that way with the hospital people. Almost 2 months passed before he decided to put in his prosthesis. He installed the fresh catheter after cleaning the back of the unit to near sterility, put some lubricating gel on the end of the pump, and pushed. It went in about an inch and stopped. He felt a straining, stretching sensation as he pushed, but it wouldn't go in any further. As he pushed and twisted, it started to hurt. It almost felt like there was an obstruction in the way. He still had reservations about touching himself there. Washing was done quickly without really looking or feeling, as he was trying his best to maintain an inner image of maleness. Touching a vagina that was part of himself was simply too much to process. Sticking a finger in it was simply unthinkable. Until that moment. Something was terribly wrong. Last time he put it in, it fit snugly, but it went in. Now it didn't fit at all. For the first time since the surgery, he stuck his finger in. Even with the lubricant, it was tight. Miranda, as a virgin, wasn't that tight. Nobody had told him that this could happen. They expected him to use the prosthesis every day. Last time he had used it, he had noticed a little snugness after a couple of days without it after the incident in the motel room, but he never expected this. He also didn't expect how good it felt with the finger in there. He had never been one to masturbate, as his dad had caught him when he was about 11 and told him what an evil thing he was doing. He didn't do it anymore. His only sexual release was with women. Except for a couple of prostitutes, only 3 of them. The last couple of years of his marriage were pretty much platonic, as menopause had made Miranda a on-again, off-again sexual partner, and her desire for sex didn't correspond to his work schedule. As a result, except for some heavy petting, they were basically celibate for the last 2 years. Because of his prostate problems and slightly elevated blood pressure, he couldn't remember the last spontaneous erection. That is what the finger in his vagina felt like. He had forgotten how good that felt, as he never took the time to enjoy it before. Use it or lose it, I guess, he muttered to himself. He thought about the exercises Marjorie tried to teach him so he could make the prosthesis stand erect. Up till now, he couldn't put his finger in his vagina to do them. Now his finger was there, so he tentatively squeezed down on it. He felt the pressure on his finger and a sensation like he'd never felt before. He moved his finger again and squeezed down again, and his pelvic floor contracted involuntarily. That had never happened with the prosthesis, but then he had never tried to make it happen with the prosthesis. He pulled the finger out. It was still a tight fit. He lay on his back on the edge of the bed with his feet on the floor and considered what had just happened. He couldn't use the prosthesis until he dilated himself. To do that, he had to commit a parental taboo that was so deeply buried in his subconscious that up till now he wasn't even aware of it. Now, he needed to violate that taboo frequently to be male in society, and it felt good. No angry and vengeful deity rained judgment on him. In that big mausoleum of a house, Charlene wasn't aware that he was doing anything untoward. What would she think if she walked in on him then? She was even more uptight and repressed than he was. She still avoided physical contact. She still remained fully clothed around him, even early in the morning. Most of the time, the only indication of her presence was a sparkling, clean house and grounds. She did housework, yard work, and read. When they would meet, they would exchange small talk and pleasantries and go their separate ways. The only indication that she lived there was the pile of books beside the bed in the guest room and the crucifix on the wall at the head of the bed. She seemed happy enough so Ben didn't stir things up. He also resolved to close both bedroom doors while he worked to make his body fit the prosthesis. He only needed to figure out how to make it fit. Church 5, the Anointing. Francis and Jack both felt called to the ancient mine. Jack walked, Francis drove as far as he could and walked the rest of the way. They both arrived close to the same time. Jack brought some venison jerky and tobacco as an offering. Francis brought a written prayer on parchment and some tobacco. Without a word to each other, they sprinkled tobacco to the 4 cardinal directions and lay the rest of their offerings in the center of the opening. Then they lit a small fire. Francis intoned the prayer, then they both sat just outside the opening until the sun reached its peak at noon. At noon, they lit a pine knot torch and walked into the mine. The air was cool and damp. In the distance, they could hear water dripping and small animals scurrying away from the light of the torch. They followed the turns and twists as the tunnel followed the soft part of the vein of coal. Neither one spoke as they walked deeper into the tunnel. The only sounds were their footsteps and the random dripping of water. They came to a fork in the tunnel. At the center of the fork was a large rock. It was flat on top and obviously didn't come from inside the tunnel. It had ochre markings on it that predated Sequoia's alphabet by at least 1,000 years. They made offering and circled the stone 3 times, and Francis intoned an ancient chant that came from somewhere inside his soul. Jack stood and watched. Both men sat down on opposite sides of the rock and waited. The echoes from the chant rang through the tunnel for a long time, getting fainter and fainter until they were totally subliminal. The torch popped and hissed, but still burned brightly. Both men waited, becoming in oneness with the sounds and smells of the mine. Eventually, the pine knot ran out of resin and died down to a glowing red coal. Both men sought oneness with the gathering darkness. Francis took the glowing coal of a torch and lay it in the center of the rock. He sat down again and waited. The hot coal got dimmer and dimmer as it sought a state of entropy from the rock. As the light went away, the ochre markings on the sides of the rock got brighter. As the light totally died, all that was visible were the markings. As they sat in the dark and waited, they started to hear voices, soft at first, but getting clearer as time went on. They were familiar voices from the summer afternoon naps between the twin rocks beside the family homestead. Familiar voices in a strange but familiar ancient tongue that beckoned and reassured at the same time. A presence joined them as they sat and waited. The presence was the source of the ancient words. As they sat, they felt the presence stir through its pack and pull various items out and set them on the rock. There was a bright spark, a little flame that grew brighter, and then a white flame like they had never seen before as a small gray stone burst into flame. The man who struck the flame was dressed totally in rough-cut buckskin. The clothing was made for function, not ceremony, but it added dignity to the ancient man wearing it. He pulled a pipe from his pack and lay it on the stone. He pulled a small buckskin bag out of his pack and shook 2 small mushrooms out onto the rock. He broke them up and put them into the pipe. He dipped a twig into the burning rock and lit the pipe and handed it to Francis. Francis pulled a draw on the pipe and handed it to Jack. The ancient stranger finished the bowl and put the pipe back into his pack. As suddenly as it ignited, the bright white fire went out. As their eyes accustomed themselves to the darkness, they saw a clarity that they hadn't seen in the bright light. It was totally dark, but yet they saw everything perfectly. A chill ran through them. As they sat in the darkness and looked around, they felt the presence of thousands of people, men, women, and children. Every one of them was quiet and attentive. I, Bear Claw, known to the English as Robert Foster, have called you all here to welcome our 2 new shamans, Francis the Toad Smasher, known to the English as Francis Foster, and the Kid, known to the English as Jack Foster. There was a general murmur through the multitude. Francis and Jack looked at each other. Neither one of them had expected anything like this. It felt like the entire past Cherokee Nation was here. The mine had become a mountaintop with a huge stone altar on the center of the summit. There was heavy forest in every direction. The multitude stretched to the tree line in every direction. They were dressed in everything from animal skins to modern clothing. Bear Claw spoke again. The Kid was selected by the General Council because he is the most powerful tribal member in generations. He was born and raised in the holy place and has mastered all of the trails of the netherworld. He understands cosmic deeds and is of the coyote. Francis the Toad Smasher was also selected by the General Council because he knows the song and all of its languages. He knows the invocations and the banishments. He knows the proper places and times of offerings, as well as what offerings may be appropriate. He is of the owl. He will be our high priest. Bearclaw took an ancient pottery vessel out of his pack and walked over to Francis and Jack. He put his thumb into the vessel and pulled out an amber paste and smeared it on their foreheads. My children, you have been anointed with the salve of the nation. You will heal the psyche of the tribe and mend the soul of the earth. You will take in and protect our holiest of places and keep them holy. You will find and anoint those who are worthy to be your helpers, as the task is huge and the time is short. The entire multitude started to chant as one. We are from the earth, as we are of the earth. Our bodies came from the earth and return to the earth. Each of us is as important as any other of us, as we are all brothers and sisters. We are all one. All mankind is part of us, as we are all part of mankind. Our songs and stories, intertwined like the grapes and honeysuckle, as it is, all one story, as we are one. The world made us, as we made the world, as we are one, as we are one, as we are one. Francis woke up in the sleeper of his truck, in the parking lot of the U.S. Atomic Energy Research Center in Oak Ridge. His clothes were covered in coal dust. He had a clear amber-colored salve on his forehead and a blinding headache. There was a brown cellar spider adding her 2 cents to his dream catcher. It was approaching sunset. Jack woke up in the hollow space between the twin rocks at the family homestead. There were half a dozen snakes coiled or stretched out around him. He was covered in coal dust and also had a clear amber paste on his forehead and a blinding headache. Church